Welcome back to another episode of the Runway Pod, where we discuss Web3, crypto, current events, politics, and more. A lot's been happening in the past week. We got the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. We had a crypto council at the White House. We unpacked that and watched that last Friday. A lot of fundamentally extremely bullish things happening for the industry. This popped up on my feed today. Got Bitcoin. Do you understand the predicament you are in yet? So I saw this, and again, it's extremely Orwellian, but it looks like the European Commission is trying to use $10 trillion of euros of citizens' savings for EU defense. The European Commission estimates the total level of unused savings of EU citizens at 10 trillion euros, and it intends to find ways to mobilize this money to finance its plans to militarize Europe and support the European military-industrial complex, according to a statement by European Commissioner for Financial Services and the Savings and Investment Union. That is wild. What do you think about that, Jeff? Like, essentially what they're saying here is that they think that they can just confiscate savers' funds and deploy that to fund a war machine in Europe.
Isn't there a name for that? Like not a bailout, but is it similar to like a bail-in? Or
No, they're literally taking. I mean, the way that I'm reading this is that they are taking, like, they're basically saying, like, the people in the Eurozone have like bank accounts and they have savings accounts, and like there's like $10 trillion of people have like money in their savings accounts, and they're basically, what they're saying is they're going to try to figure out a way to get that money to use that in some way to finance their war machine to essentially resecuritize Europe. Is the way I'm understanding that.
That's really interesting. I mean, it sounds like a bail-in, like when the banks go in and take your money from instead.
Yeah,
of,
pretty much. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening here almost.
It's kind of scary. I mean,
isn't that wild? That's what they did in Cyprus. I think when Bitcoin first really had its initial like aha moment. This was even before, a lot of people don't know about this, but this was well before, the Canadian trucker protests and all these other things. But they actually went in and basically just confiscated people's savings in Cyprus because the government was so incompetent and corrupt. They couldn't finance their operations. They just basically gave everybody a haircut. They said, "Hey, we're just stealing everybody's money."
I mean, I guess there's two ways to look at it. People that think that would never happen, and those that have actually gone through it, like the people in Venezuela and things like that that are aware that it is possible. And I think just the possibility of something like that happening is kind of scary.
It is. It really is. I mean, it's Bitcoin is an idea that's moment has come, right? Bitcoin is, if you self-custody your Bitcoin and you have full custody of it, you truly have ownership, and nobody can come in and give you a haircut, take your Bitcoin away from you, right? It's important for people to have freedom money, right? Freedom money is extremely important.
Yeah, definitely. I think, that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is you can have it both ways. If you want to be fully custody, you can do that, but you also have, if you prefer to have an institution handle it, where, on an exchange, you have that option as well.
Yeah, I mean, important to note that you're in the same predicament if they come try to give you a haircut. If you've got your money on an exchange, that money is not fully in your custody. So you could suffer from the same thing. Now, if you want to just get price exposure and you're just trying to get your feet wet, obviously that's a place to start to try to understand things. But eventually the goal is for you to self-custody, to gain that full sovereignty, that true bare asset nature of Bitcoin, to endorse that and to support that and to utilize that feature, right? It's one of the main value propositions of Bitcoin, right? Having this idea of anybody in the world being able to custody their own wealth and their own money using cryptography is extremely important, right? Especially when you see things like this, the government basically just going and saying, "Hey, we're going to just take savers' money." They already do that via inflation by printing money. They steal from savers that way, but to just go right out and say it is, "Hey, we're going to find a way to use all these savers' money to like fund the military-industrial complex in Europe," is kind of wild to actually see that being said so openly in public. Very wild.
How far along in the process are they? I mean, is it happening? Is it an idea?
I think this is the way to get the public warmed up to it, right? They're kind of like, the little gaslighting comes out, and obviously with everything that's happening in the world right now, right? Like, the Trump and the administration is kind of pulling back some of that war machine that was funding Ukraine and all these different conflicts, and kind of like saying, "Hey, we're going to like not be involved in all this anymore." Like, and Europe has to kind of now step up if they want to continue to fund that war. And ultimately, if they don't have the money to fund the war, what other way can they do that? Well, they can steal from their citizens, right? And that's in many ways, the way the governments fund all of these wars that they commit throughout history, right? Even the past century, we've seen some of the most violent and deadly conflicts in all of human history. Well, why has that been? Largely, it's been because the government can print money and steal money very easily, right? They have the ability to increase the money supply and essentially steal via inflation. We saw that in most of all the world wars that occurred. And, now you're seeing the next level of that is just, hey, we're just going to go into your savings account and just use your money without your permission. We're just going to take it to fund this, right?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, instead of doing like a war bond and giving people the option, like, hey, you want to get a return as like an investment vehicle? Do you support the war or whatever? You can put your money where your mouth is and buy it. They know it's so unpopular that they couldn't do that. They would actually have to go and just steal it from people.
And I think that's one of the, looking into the future, kind of seeing like what this technology allows is the programmability of, this, you hear this term digital economy. I think that this would be a perfect example where if they had something that they wanted to invest in, you can have a token that can transfer your value from your wallet or your hands to another, and you can actually see what's happening with it if it's public.
That's the beautiful part about blockchains, right? Is this public, transparent ledger that people can view, right? You can see where the money's going, right? If people paid their taxes in Bitcoin, they could see the government receiving the funds, and then you could follow. Hey, where is this money going? Right? It's going here. It's going there. It's going there. Oh, why is it going to all these politicians, like family members' accounts? Right? What's going on here? Right? You'd actually be able to see that. Right now, it's the complete opposite. Total corruption. Totally not transparent. But I just thought this was interesting that they were just putting that out there so publicly. I thought it was worth discussing and talking about.
Warm up to the idea,
right? Just the gaslighting. Here's another take. I saw this on, I grabbed it because it's from 4chan, but sometimes on 4chan, right, you find the diamond in the rough. So there's some interesting takes from people. And I thought it's worth unpacking. So Matt Brainerd posted this from 4chan. So it says, it's talking about what the play is of the Trump administration. Markets have been kind of rocky. Why? What's up with tariffs? What's going on with the game theory here? Like, what is the thought? Is it just chaos? Do they have a plan? This is what somebody posted on 4chan. This was an interesting take that I found very interesting. Trump is trying to crash the stock market at least 20%, causing a flight into treasuries. This will cause the Fed to slash interest rates so he can refinance the debt to near 0% and cause a deflationary spiral, which will lower the cost of everything. He also intends to use tariffs as an incentive for companies to build in the U.S. to avoid having to pay them. The tariffs and the resulting global trade war will also force American farmers to sell more of their goods in the U.S. due to retaliatory trade measures by other countries, which will directly lower the price of groceries in the U.S. More than 94% of all stock is owned by just 8% of the U.S. population. Trump is literally taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. This is why Trump is playing a game of hokey pokey with tariffs. One day he has 25% tariffs on Mexico, and the next he doesn't. This is to cause extreme volatility in the markets and a desperate need and demand to flee towards treasury bonds, which are much more stable but offer much lower potential return. This is also why eggs are cheaper now than they were under Joe Biden. So I think that take to me was very interesting. And I think structurally it's aligned with exactly what's happening. And I think we're already seeing Trump vary from his first administration, where he was very concerned about the stock market, to now he's saying, he even said in an interview, I think recently this week, that, hey, there's going to be some short-term pain. He's kind of like acknowledging that. And that the reason for that is that the more money that flows into treasuries, and if the market corrects a little bit, right? Because you saw here, only 8% of people own stocks and own assets, right? When assets appreciate, it increases and exacerbates that wealth gap that we see. So I think this is more of a Main Street, pro-worker, pro-friendly approach to lower costs. And if you look at the trueflation charts of the inflation right now is like literally it's falling off of a cliff right now. I think I have it tagged somewhere, Paul, on one of the next posts, but you're seeing massive deflationary pressure here from some of these policies. And I think it will be bumpy for a while. It's definitely going to be bumpy. There's going to be a little bit of a recalibration. We're seeing the stoppage of the theft of hundreds of billions, trillions even of taxpayer money being used to fund all sorts of political slush funds, NGOs, wars all over the place. And I think Elon is really helping with DOGE bring that to an end. and we're seeing, but that also is going to make the economy look worse because it was all this government money that was being pumped out and spent everywhere, and now that's going away. So there's all these, phony contracts and phony, contractors and phony BS. Well, they were getting all this money and spending it on all sorts of stuff. So this government spending was make this artificial economy look so good, right? If you look at the numbers for the past years, it was like everything's so good, right? The market's up, it keeps going up, everything's so good. But like the people did not believe that. The average people were like, they're full of shit. This isn't real, right? Like and that was reflected in the election results, right? Even though you could say like the stock market kept going up, all these things were looking good. Well, the people didn't feel that, and they knew it was bullshit. They knew these reports always revised down, always fake. So I think the long-term play here is the U.S. has, I think, $5 to $7 trillion of debt that's upcoming that needs to be refinanced. Trump has already been on the record saying, Powell, we need you to lower the interest rates. Powell tries to remain apolitical and says, no, we're going to use data, whatever it may be. They're kind of like butting heads there. Well, I think Trump is literally, with Scott Bessent, they are literally trying to force Powell's hand here to lower interest rates. What will that do? That will allow the United States to now refinance this debt in the next 6 to 12 months. If we see the economy retreating, if we see inflation getting crushed, Powell is going to be forced to respond by lowering interest rates, right? So that's exactly what's going to probably happen. And when that happens, we can now refinance the $7 trillion or however much debt the U.S. has. And now that's at a lower rate. Refinancing those treasuries is a much less drain on the American taxpayer, right? We don't have to pay as heavy of an interest expense. They don't have to print as much money now to pay that interest expense. They don't have to tax as much to pay that interest expense, right? So I think that's the play here. And I think it's an interesting play. And I think I see a lot of potential for good things here. There are things to be, there's some cause for concern when it comes to, being so erratic with all these tariffs and who knows what is going to happen. It's hard for business to plan around that kind of erratic behavior, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, it remains to be seen how these things play out. Will we get concessions from Canada, from Mexico, from enemies like China, from whoever, where at the end of the day, we end up with a situation that the trade is a lot fairer, right? They've reduced their tariffs. Maybe we've reduced ours. Maybe, we raised, tariffs a little bit here on things that we want to make sure we make in the U.S. for national security purposes, but then we lower them here on these other 10 goods, right? And net in, net out, it actually ends up to be a fair trade relationship where there is some of that protectionism that you get for domestic industries that are critically important to national security. But maybe there's concessions made that rebalance things, right? And I think that could be a very good thing.
And when in history has there been a time like DOGE right now? They're showing how much has been saved so far.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from there? We just have a final number? Do we think that they'll digitize that to see where it goes to after?
Yeah, I think that they are already tracking this and it's going to continue, right? Because I think they're just getting started. Like they've already saved like over $100 billion and it's been 30 to 40 days, right? So there has been some talk about maybe giving people a $5,000 check or something like that. I don't think that's the greatest idea, but that was one thing they were talking about doing with the savings. But the other thing was just paying down the debt, saving the taxpayers' money, lowering taxes. Because I know Trump and the Congress, they want to push through extend tax cuts and continue to lower tax cuts. I personally hope they just abolish the income tax altogether. That's what I'd love to see. Because if you're going to add tariffs, that is an additional kind of tax, right? So how do you offset that? Well, get rid of the income tax on our citizens, and yeah, you can tax. If you're going to tax over here, just take away the income tax, right? That way, I'd be totally okay with having some tariffs if we get rid of the income tax.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
But that is a good question. When in history have we had something similar to DOGE? And there actually have been quite a few.
There's been quite a few. There was even under Bill Clinton, they had a big one, the National Performance Review, and they found a lot of that was actually led by the Democrats last time, right? The Democratic Party, and they did a great job. And I think they found a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, but nothing is even touching what Elon is doing now. Elon is like literally just going right to the core, the root. Elon, like these other things are like politicians and bureaucrats, and they like maybe trimmed a little bit of fat around the edges. Like Elon is going right to the core of the system. He's going right to like the computer system to like see who has access keys to what, and follow the money just from the root. Let's go right to the root and let's follow and see where money is being spent, and let's go down each little stem and see. Oh my God, this is a politician giving $100 million to his wife. This is another politician running $80 million to her daughter, right? Chelsea Clinton getting $84 million to do a Haitian charity when she's buying houses and all sorts of stuff with that money, right? Potentially. That's what it looks like, I guess. And then you just got all these little scams, all these little grifts, all these lawyers now, or these judges now that are like trying to put injunctions on this. And you find out that like the dude's wife just got a $5 million payout from this NGO, right? It's just so corrupt, right? So he's trying to get to the root of that corruption. This is what I was talking about. This is a leading report from Leading Report. It shows the inflation from Trueflation, and what we're seeing is like literally inflation is falling off of a cliff. So, and this is leading indicator, right? So we haven't actually seen the other government CPI reports and all this stuff come out yet. So this is leading that, right? And if they're able to thread this needle of really crushing inflation, getting it down super. I mean, we're under 1% now is what this is, I think, showing. 1.35%. That's what we're at today. I mean, if that is true, and that's really where it shakes out and where we come out, I think the Fed is absolutely going to immediately have to lower interest rates, right? Because the stock market, all the markets are down right now. So it's like, okay, now we got to worry about a recession. So we have to lower interest rates. So this is really, I think, the needle that the Trump administration is trying to thread, and it looks like they're well on their way. They're well on their way. This is what I was talking about earlier, Paul, on when we were talking to Scott. Pull up this post. Yeah, you can see this. We were talking about vaccines and this correlation of increase in autism, right? There's correlation there? Is there causality? We don't know yet if it really has a huge effect. That's still being studied, but the jury is out, I guess, as you could say, right? It's highly probable that it does, but we just don't know for sure. But what I was saying is there's also other confounders, right? Like there's other reasons why autism rates might be skyrocketing. And a lot of times is if you follow the money and you look at the incentives, you can see why those things happen, right? So on the left, you can see child autism diagnosis. On the right, you can see states with policies that give schools more money when their students are diagnosed with autism. When these policies pass, autism diagnoses increase by almost 25%. So that is a pretty massive incentive because these schools are getting government taxpayer money essentially to diagnose more people with autism. So it's like kind of what we saw with COVID. Like, hospitals were getting checks every time somebody came in that had COVID. So it was like everybody has COVID. You died from a car accident, you got COVID. Another COVID death. You got hit by a train. Oh, sorry, you have COVID, right? Because all they got to do is put that, oh, he coughed or he sneezed, he has COVID symptoms, right? And they got these payouts, right? Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. So it's an interesting point to think about all these different things, right? Like there's all sorts of different incentives and, yes, there probably definitely is a link between a lot of these, heavy metals that they have in these vaccines that they're injecting into kids and people and, some rise in autism. It's likely that there's, some causation and correlation there, but there's also stuff like this talking about why have these diagnoses skyrocketed? Well, if you're giving schools money every time they diagnose somebody with autism, all of a sudden you can just see the diagnoses go through the roof, where other schools or other states where they don't do that, you don't see that. So I thought it was just very fascinating to look at. What's our next take, Paul?
It's also interesting to like how far along, what other dynamics affect this change, because it's things like your food, all the stuff that they put into food that's not I don't want to say it's not regulated, but very low regulation in what goes into your food. That's why the United States has a lot less strict, guidelines on what's allowed to go into the food, which essentially, I mean, could it be that it's it's an incentive to keep those things out there because you get more diagnoses? Or
I mean, there's all sorts of things at play here, right? Increase in vaccines, increase in unhealthy foods, money being paid to different schools to confirm these diagnoses, right? So there's all sorts of things are not as black and white as they always seem, right? There's many factors at play. So yeah, interesting. Let's see here. Oh, this is a nice, interesting little scam that they've uncovered from I believe DOGE uncovered this one. A vaccine company registered to a post office box run by 2 former Biden staffers received $28 million in the final months of the Biden administration, right? So this is like this whole idea of like crony capitalism, like a kleptocracy, essentially. Like, it's just, paying all your friends on the way out, right? I think I listened to the All In Pod last week, and Chamath Palihapitiya was talking about this. He talked about how like he had been doing, I think it was a battery company or something, and like he was jumping through all these hoops, and he had all this technology, and like it was so amazing, and like they got denied for this grant, and then they came back and they did so well. Like they had, proof of concept, they had sale, like they had all this stuff, and they were so qualified, and eventually they got a $100 million grant, and then like 2 days later, a politically connected person, like with the Biden administration or whatever administration, basically had 2 people start a company and got $1 billion. Like with no anything. The only reason they got it is because they were politically connected, right? So this is the type of thing that Americans are just sick of. We don't want to see this. We need a rules and standards based, completely open, transparent. Like, the stuff like that should not be happening in America. It's totally un-American.
And I think that's just another example of what can be affected by having a digital economy or a way to track taxpayers' money.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think taxpayers will be a lot happier if they can see where their money is actually going, and they know it's why people are much more open to paying local taxes, right? Because it's like you see, oh, there's a school being built, or oh, there's a park being, like, your property taxes, et cetera. You feel that it goes into, you see where the money's being spent, and you're like, okay, like I can get behind some level of that. I don't want it too high, but I can support, giving back to my community, supporting my community somehow. And what's happening now with all of this massive fraud, waste, abuse, grift, I think people are just fed up with it. They don't want to see it anymore. It's why DOGE is so incredibly popular, despite the gaslighting and all sorts of stuff that's being said.
Do we know what we're at today? I haven't taken a look at the.
Are you talking about the DOGE tracker? Let's see. Paul can pull it up. We're up over 5. So the goal was 2 trillion. And we're at 5.25%. So it looks like we're right up to 105 billion. So over the past couple of days, looks like they've saved another $1 billion or so. Very wild. Let's see what else we got for us. Yeah, pull up that Nicole Shanahan take. So, have you been following this?
No.
I think Trump has been attacking Thomas Massie, who's always been like I think he's part of the Freedom Caucus, and he's always very anti like waste, grift, abuse, like very pro liberty, very pro freedom. So I think Trump is making a mistake with this one. Like he's going after somebody, and he's going at it from the point that Massie kind of just votes no on everything, because it's like the Titanic is. It's like the Titanic is sinking. It just hit an iceberg, and like one side of the aisle is like, "Hey, let's put one Band-Aid on it," and the other side of the aisle is like, "No, let's put 2 Band-Aids on it," right? But like the boat's sinking. It's like basically they're just as bad as each other, right? They're wasting and spending all this money. So, I mean, look what's being found right now with all this grift that DOGE is uncovering. So I think he didn't want to vote to pass a new budget that still funded so many of these programs. And even though it was the Republicans that were passing that same budget, right? Maybe it was a little bit better than what the Democrat side would have passed, but he was basically saying like, no, like let's not keep this going. We need to fix this problem. And Trump was not happy that he voted no on that thing. So I think Trump's best instincts are also some of his worst instincts sometimes, right? Like in this scenario, I think he could have probably reached out to Thomas Massie and said, hey, like what will it take to get your support on this bill? And maybe explain what the strategy is. I think the strategy is extend this out for a couple more months so we can try to structurally fix it. I think that just wasn't maybe communicated so well. But I think threatening to primary someone like Thomas Massie is not a good idea, bad decision. So I think rightly so, Nicole Shanahan here is saying, if President Trump really wanted Massie out of Congress, he should have listened to farmers and put him in charge of the USDA. Trying to get him to compromise on principle and increase spending, that will never work. Lesser men have tried and failed. He literally wears a debt clock on his jacket. The White House misses the mark on this one. And I agree with Nicole's take on this. I think she's right. What do you think, Jeff? You caught up to speed on all that, or is that
a little bit? I'm curious to know what was it that he was trying to fund, like this, like the bill, or what was it that was being passed? The funding.
I think they call it the CR, the continuing resolution, which is kind of just like continue spending everything that's being spent right now.
He has a point. Aren't we trying to work on the opposite of that? Like figure out, like wrap our
I think
hands
that's
around?
the point. Yeah. So I think what Trump was basically saying is, hey, give us a couple, like, let's just continue. Let's not shut down the government right now. Like, let's continue out for a couple more months, and then we can strategically start dealing with the problem. But I think Thomas Massey is just like, nah, like this is out of control. Like we need to deal with this right now. I think that's the disagreement there.
Dave Smith had a good take on this on his podcast yesterday, and he was saying that Washington's slogan should be "Now is not the time," because every single time anybody says, "Hey, we probably shouldn't do this," they'll be like, "Now's not the time," right?
Yeah.
Like we have to push this through because it has to happen, and we'll talk about debt later, right? We'll address the problem later. But Massey is consistent with his stance. He always wants to limit government spending because that is essentially a tax on all of us, right? And he just stood on his principles.
I guess the question is, are they really going to address it in 3 months or whenever? I think that was kind of the idea was, hey, give us 3-4 months. We're going to come up with a plan and then deal with it. But like, let's just continue. Let's not stop. Let's not shut down the entire government right now. Let's just keep it going until we can come up with a better plan because everything's still in flux. I don't know, but I just think it was a bad. That whoever advised Trump on that, or if that's just his own instincts, I think that was a bad decision to go after Massey. Massey is extremely principled, extreme promoter of freedom, liberty, small government, etc. So good on you, Nicole. That was a great take. Hey, can you pull up the ceasefire statement? Ukraine agrees. I think I had something tagged about that. If you go down there to the ceasefire stalemate, I think you see it at the bottom of the screen. They're scroll up a little bit. So Ukraine has agreed to a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire, aiming for a sustainable peace process. Following this agreement, the U.S. has resumed intelligence sharing and security assistance with Ukraine. However, Russia has rejected the ceasefire proposal, indicating their terms for peace include conditions like halting weapon supplies to Ukraine. Diplomatic discussions continue with varying stances from both sides on achieving a long-term peace. So it says, breaking just hours after Ukraine and the U.S. agreed to a proposal for a 30-day ceasefire during talks in Saudi Arabia, Russia launched a deadly attack on President Zelensky's hometown of Kryvyi. At least one is dead and 14 injured. So this guy's very upset. He says Putin is a monster. I think the other take on this, or actually go down one more. It says Rubio's take. This is actually from 10 hours ago. So he said that Ukraine demonstrated that their government is ready to take steps toward restoring durable peace and expressed readiness to accept the U.S. proposal to enact an immediate 30-day ceasefire. As a result, we will immediately lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume security assistance to Ukraine. So I saw yesterday that right before they tried to do the ceasefire, Ukraine sent like a bunch of drones into Moscow or something like that. And then right after that, they're like, yeah, let's do a ceasefire. So I think what you're seeing today is probably the response to what happened yesterday. So,
and when was the agreement?
See if you can go back, Paul, and
when was the agreement for the ceasefire?
I don't know if Russia has actually agreed to the ceasefire. I think it's just Ukraine agreed to the U.S. saying, let's have a ceasefire. So if you go back to all my takes, Paul, and just scroll down, I think I flagged that it's near the top. It's one of the more recent ones I did. I saw you where I touched on it early. Go down a little bit more. Let's see. Keep going. Oh, there it is, right there. Go up. Oliver Alexander. Yeah, smart political move by Ukraine. So I saw this yesterday, and I was curious, like how it was going to play out today. I was like, I don't know if Russia is going to agree to the ceasefire after reading this. He goes, smart political move by Ukraine. Last night, they struck Moscow with a large number of IWA attack drones. Today, they agreed to a ceasefire with the U.S. and get intel sharing and aid switch back on. Now Putin has to accept the ceasefire or become the ones making Trump look bad. given that Moscow was just hit, accosting the ceasefire makes Putin look weak domestically, a lose-lose situation for Putin right now. So I think that was a pretty good analysis. And then you watched how it played out the next day. Obviously, they returned a strike and didn't agree to the ceasefire conditions. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting to see how that played out. But hopefully, we do get peace. Hopefully, Trump can thread the needle here, and the Trump administration can thread the needle and get this thing resolved. I mean, hopefully, they'll come back to the table and we'll get something going here. Let's see here. Kathy Wood. This is an interesting take about the current state of the markets, right? You'd expect with all the bullish fundamental news of the Bitcoin strategic reserve, the digital asset stockpile, the changing of another thing that happened was the OCC essentially removed all guidance that said you had to get permission to do any crypto activity. If you were a bank, they just said, hey, you have to just follow the procedure for every other asset class. We're not going to just treat one asset class or one industry differently. And that's a structurally bullish and extremely huge announcement, right, for the Web3 industry at large. So there's all these bullish headwinds that are occurring, right? And Kathy Wood has an interesting take here. She says, in our view, the market is discounting the last leg of a rolling recession, which will give the Trump administration and the Powell Fed many more degrees of freedom than investors expect, setting up the U.S. economy for a deflationary boom in the second half of this year. So very interesting take. She's always the techno optimist. I love her takes, Kathy. So that's a good one. So a rolling recession is when like a recession hits like different industries at different times. So like it doesn't all hit the whole market at once. It's like this industry, then it hits this industry, then it hits this industry. She's making the case that that's what's going on now. I think that she raises some good points, and we'll see how it plays out. I think it's a very optimistic take, but I do think there's some short-term pain obviously occurring, and I think that you have to kind of clear out all the brush before you can rebuild and have a better economy. And I think so much of what we've seen the past 4 years was completely fake and was completely just taxpayer money being spent on government bullshit and wasted and embezzled. And I think the market is cleansing itself a little bit, and things are going to change. So this is an interesting one. Mike Benz raised a 5-alarm fire on this one. He says, right now, as we speak today, USAID is shredding and burning the contents of the agency's classified safes. The key information needed to reconstruct the history of USAID's weaponization, both at home and abroad. This must be stopped. So I've heard two sides to this. Obviously, we know Mike's side, but I've also heard the side that like this is just, I guess 95, I think it was like 85 or 88% of the industry of USAID is being like discontinued. Only like 12%. Like Elon went through it and looked at all the stuff and was like, okay, we're going to like 12% of this stuff makes sense. The other stuff is just complete bullshit, fraud, nonsense. And the take that I've heard from the other side is that like this is just standard routine procedure. There's like, the agency's pretty much shutting down. It's getting trimmed by 88%. There's all this personal private information. It's just like standard. We need to like shred documents and get rid of whatever is remaining because it's, you can't just have that after everybody leaves. So I think that there is no attempt at hiding it. Like it's public. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're just doing this because this is shutting down and there's private information and documents or whatever. And it's just all routine procedure. What do you think, Jeff? You think it's all routine, or you think we should be worried about it?
If they're going to cut it down and only have like 12% of it running, I mean, you're going to have some byproduct of whatever that was going on before that you might want to clean up and not have to deal with in the future.
I heard the claim too that like all of it's still stored on computers, so they're just getting rid of a lot of the physical paper copies of all this stuff. That
is there a rule to how long they have to keep it? Like 7 years? Or?
I'm not sure about this particular information. I do, from what I heard, is that it is important. It is the rule that you have to get rid of that. Like if it's shutting down or these things are going away, you do have to shred it, and you can't leave information like government information just laying out in a building, right?
That sounds about right. If you're shutting down and only using 12% of whatever they have going on, of course there's going to be some stuff that you got to get rid of. And if it's taking up space, like physical space, then
people have all sorts of different takes.
And anyone that's listening or hearing this information, they're going to take it to however they think it's beneficial to their thoughts and ideas.
That's a good point, right? People always, the way you view the world a lot of times is everything is viewed through that lens or that glass, like those rose-colored glasses, right?
Yeah. So if you think like, oh, it's bad, it'll be bad for you, or if it's good, it'll be good. So there's more than two ways, different views that you can.
I think you see what you want to see a lot of times. People do. I try my best to remain objective. Like, I've said this like 5 times today. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That's how I feel. I try to remain even keeled, but it is hard sometimes, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think this is a good take on that from one ex-user underneath this post.
He says, "This is outrageous. We need transparency, not destruction of evidence. The American people deserve to know what's been going on with the USAID's classified activities. Trump and Kash Patel must step in and put a stop to this immediately. We can't let them cover their tracks." So, yeah, obviously we want transparency. The question is this just standard procedure? Is it being done publicly and openly? Do we have the official statement that I've heard is that all this information still exists on computers. This is not like these are just paper documents.
I was going to say, if there's digital copies, then
that's pretty much that's what I've heard. They just said that you can't just leave all this stuff in a building that's like getting emptied and vacated. Like, it has to be destroyed.
That, and whoever's saying like, oh, this is going to get, we got to see what's behind the scenes before you get rid of it. Like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you think that, like,
we've pretty much already identified like a lot of the fraud. So we see where this money's like. What did Trump State of the Union address? He said, $100 million for study of sedentary migrants in the African country of Lesotho. He said nobody even knows where that is. You know what I mean? Like, we can see the fraud. Like, we know what's going on. And I'm sure there is some good things, right? Like, there's probably some good things happening, but the majority of it is fraudulent and taxpayers should not be on the hook for regardless, right? So I'm glad that they're shutting it all down and winding it down. Let's see what else we got. Oh, this is a wild one. I tagged this one because what's happening in Seattle and Washington is wild right now. There's this guy, Robert Barnes, is operating there in Seattle and like Washington, and you just have these judges that are basically saying like the Constitution doesn't exist in my courtroom. But like, as part of their process to become judicial officers, right? They have to take an oath and an affirmation before entering their duties, right? So it says here that outlining Article 1, Section 6, which states that all officers must swear or affirm to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and to faithfully discharge the duties of their office. This applies to judges at all levels: Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Superior Courts, and lower courts like district and municipal courts. The precise statutory implementation comes from Revised Code of Washington 2.08.080, which mandates that Superior Court judges, and by extension, other judicial officers through similar provisions, take an oath before assuming office. The oath is typically based on the general form for state officers in RCW 43-120. And they basically swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Washington. So the fact that these judges then do that, swear that oath, and then basically they didn't let this lawyer, I think Robert Barnes, can you go back to Robert Barnes' take, Paul? It says, like, there's no place for the Constitution in this courtroom, and the Constitution is not lawful authority. King County Judge Parisian in the case of State versus Ben Schoof. Welcome to Seattle. Pull that one up. Pull up his actual quote. I think he has a little bit another comment underneath where he talks more about it. Maybe not on this one. But what I read was that he was saying that like the defense to the case was literally the Constitution, and the judge was like, you're not allowed. This Judge Parisian basically said, you're not allowed to bring up the Constitution in this courtroom. I mean, who the fuck do these people think they are? I mean, this woman should be instantly disbarred.
Is it because it's at a state level? Because if something happens at a state level, it can be appealed and taken to the federal level after that. And at that point,
I mean, the problem is you've got these judges that are just complete hacks, total cronies, and like regardless, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, right? That is the Constitution. So these judges claiming that you can't use the Constitution to defend your point or your case in the courtroom is absolute insanity. The Constitution supersedes everything. The U.S. Constitution is.
Is there some sort of repercussion? What will we?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, I'm shocked. I mean, but it just seems that there are no repercussions for these essentially traitors. I mean, like this person is literally a traitor to the United States of America. Like you're basically saying like the Constitution doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to you basically have no rights. We're not following the Constitution of the United States. That's essentially what she's saying. I mean, that's essentially treason in my mind. I mean, I don't know how anybody could be a judge and say that. It just blows my mind. I mean, I hope there is
that's where people at a local level have to be really involved.
The problem is, the people there are just so radicalized. It's like, they support that, right? It's crazy. So somebody said, yesterday I overheard a staggering claim. He's a constitutionalist. You know what that means? He doesn't believe in laws. He's an extremist. Can you fathom the irony? When do we break the news to them that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land? This is what we get for surrendering our schools to government control for 7 decades. We've bred generations of Americans so warped by the system, they view the Constitution as a wild, dangerous manifesto. And yes, it is dangerous, but only to those that recoil at the idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The Constitution doesn't threaten us. It shields us. Wake up. Wow, I love that.
How are they trying to use the Constitution? Like, how is it being blocked? Like, what are they
She's basically saying, like, you can't even bring it up in my courtroom. You can't use the Constitution.
What's the defense? I mean, what's the...
It could be like, hey, like, the guy could say, like, hey, I've got, like, why do you have a gun? Well, because the Second Amendment says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? So, like, his response can be the Constitution. It says, literally, this is my defense. That's just an example, right? Or, hey, I went out in public and I said... screw you, and now they want to take me to jail. So the lawyer comes and says, well, the defense is the Constitution, right? To the First Amendment, the right of free speech. So here he goes, and another lefty lawyer gets it wrong. First Amendment protects content of speech, not yelling. Courts routinely rule First Amendment does not protect the intrusiveness and loudness of expression. Why? Because people also have the right of peace and tranquility in their own space.
Well, I pulled this up searching for this one case where the judge in New York said that the Second Amendment, doesn't apply to her courtroom.
Yeah.
Remember that? It's just the disregard for law and the history, of our legal system, right? The whole founding.
Yeah.
It just shows that these institutions, whoever...
I can't believe these people aren't getting disbarred. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Isn't that what makes the uniqueness of the United States? Like, if a state decides to not uphold the Constitution at a state level, plain devil's advocate, isn't that the benefit of having states? And if you don't like it, kind of move out. Because say you go to court for something on a local level, on a state level, and you don't get the outcome you want, you can appeal it at that point and take it to the federal level, where ultimately the Constitution will survive, but will
they'll overturn the lower rulings.
Yes.
I mean, the answer to that is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. No governments can make rules that violate that Constitution. The Constitution is basically a limit on government's power, right? So it limits all governments of what they can do. It basically says, listen, you basically can make rules and laws as long as they don't infringe on these rights of the people, essentially infringe on what the government is limited from mandating, right? So in practice, we've seen a violation of this ongoing in many different cases, right? But the Constitution was basically put there to prevent governments from making laws about the things that the rights of the people, right? So any law that you make, like, that is in violation of that is immediately moot. And you're right, sometimes it does have to be appealed and appealed and appealed, and eventually it says, yeah, this is totally ridiculous. But the fact that it even gets to that point is ridiculous, because it's very apparent to see that the Constitution is the supreme law of land. So saying that you can't even bring that up in the court, it's fucking patently absurd. How did this person become a judge? Insane. I just can't grasp it. I can't fathom it. If I'm missing something, somebody can comment about it. Let me know. I mean, what am I missing here? This just seems insane, right?
Yeah.
Wild. What else you got for us, Paul? Did you see this one with all the?
Speaking of wild,
did you see this? This made me laugh. These, I guess, a bunch of topless chicks. I mean, I'm I'm not gonna lie, I saw it. I just started watching it. I'm like, what am I watching? I couldn't tell what was going on. I was like,
That's just the dog.
I was like, who's the bad guys? Who's the good? I was like, who's the bad guys? Who's the good guys? And I couldn't even be mad at them. They were just marching around with their tops off. I was kind of wild. I was like, what is going on? It was, but I guess they had these Nazi symbols on them, and I guess they're trying to say that the U.S. is Nazis. And this person had a funny take. They said, it's at Big Cloud. No, see, the good guys are the ones wearing swastikas, dressing up like Hitler, torching electric vehicles, and trying to assassinate people. The bad guys are the ones building EVs, trying to end government corruption and securing free speech. Hopefully this helps. I found that funny. But yeah, this is a bunch of topless girls, I guess, in Germany or something. I don't know. It's kind of wild. But
what are they protesting there?
I think they're saying that Americans are fascists or something. I couldn't. I was trying to figure it out, but I guess that's what they were up. They're mad about Tesla, or I guess mad about Elon. I don't know.
The EU is experiencing the same immigration issues that America is experiencing, where it's the open border policy. Essentially, a country's border is essentially to protect the citizens, right? If you have something worth protecting, right, you establish a perimeter. But the EU, the citizens largely support restricting that immigration, but there's that same woke demographic that views anything even discussing regulating that as
all I know, dude, is if they keep walking around with their tits out, we're fucked. I mean, like if they keep walking around like that, everyone's gonna come along to their side.
Bro. Only one of them had a decent C cup. Right? They were all A's. No wonder they're pissed off.
A's can play. I'd
like to see a podcast where they dress up like that and explain their case.
That would be interesting, right? But I don't know. It's not a bad strategy, honestly. Marching around topless to get people to come across to your side. I don't know.
An actual.
I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there.
If they had a rational,
okay, don't get your panties in a bunch.
I'm saying if they were able to articulate their.
I watched their whole policies. Thing, dude. I'm not gonna lie. I watched their whole thing. Normally, I wouldn't even watch that. Right. I would be like, oh, what the hell is this? But I watched the full 5-minute clip of them just marching around. I don't know. Just saying, bro.
Next episode, you know what to expect. We're gonna have a little
pull up this.
Didn't Hooters just file for bankruptcy?
I don't know. That's crazy.
Wow. Apparently, I'm pretty sure they're going bankrupt.
Wow.
Unfortunately.
Sad day for America.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Pull up I think it's because Twin Peaks is taking over the market share, man. Yeah. I think Twin Peaks is taking over. I think they're putting Hooters out of business. The food's just maybe a little bit better. Go up a little bit. I want to highlight this take. Nope, go down. So this was, who called this was BJ. BJ literally called this. He called this Mark Carney guy. I remember this Mark Carney guy was like, he was like the governor of England, Bank of England or something like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Like I don't even think this guy's fucking Canadian. I don't know. Maybe he is, but I don't think he is. It goes, oh, Canada, the new PM of Canada just moved to Canada in January. Okay, so I guess he's not. He holds 3 passports and describes himself as European. He's never run for office and no one in Canada heard of him before he was installed as prime minister. Weird. That is wild. And you know who said that they were installing that guy well in advance was BJ. BJ literally called this a couple weeks ago, Paul. Do you remember that? He literally said that they're going to put this guy as the next Trudeau.
Yeah.
This guy,
I can't believe it happened. He's got the down low.
When they say installed, that means he wasn't voted in. They put him there?
I believe so. I think they did. I think they did some phony vote where they 400,000 people. I saw something about it. It was like 400,000 people registered because Trudeau said he was going to resign. So he resigned, and what they did was they did some kind of 400,000 people said they wanted to vote, and maybe they counted 190,000 of the votes or something, and the whole thing was very sus. I don't know, the very, very sus, the whole setup.
And is he there just for the remainder of the term?
That's a good question. Yeah, pull that up on X. What's going on with that with all that Canada stuff?
And what are his ideas or what?
He's very he's a globalist, very left leaning on pretty much all issues. He's part of the Liberal Party, very similar to the Democratic Party here. Pro supporting wars, censorship is okay, those types of things. I believe.
Here's a take on it.
The status quo. So tell me how this is democracy. Our prime minister in Canada was just elected by 151,000 people. We have 41 million people in Canada, meaning just 0.37% of the population got to choose our next prime minister. What are your thoughts on this? So, but the question is he running? This wasn't the actual election, was it? This was just to fill Trudeau's seat, right? Did I get this right? Let's see. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Have you seen this? The analyzing. It's like a Grok on the post. I think that's amazing. Like if you don't understand something or you want clarity, Grok just analyzes it for you. It's so cool.
Amazing.
The post references Canada's recent political transition, where Mark Carney became prime minister after being selected by a small fraction of the population, highlighting concerns about democratic representation in Canada's parliamentary system. This shift follows Justin Trudeau's resignation after 9 years in power, with Carney, a former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor, becoming the first Canadian prime minister without prior electoral experience, as noted in recent Reuters coverage. Can you scroll down more, Paul? Or is that everything? Canada's political system. A constitutional monarchy allows the ruling party to appoint a new leader without a general election, which can lead to situations where a prime minister is chosen by a limited number of party members, fueling the debate in the post. Ask Grok if he has to run, because Pierre Poilievre is the other guy, I think, from the right side. Ask when there's going to be an actual prime minister election in Canada. I don't understand how Canadian politics works.
I think it's
BJ has a really,
like 2 years.
BJ Dichter has a really good understanding of all that. He really understands all the little different things. Let's see the next federal election. I'll go up a little bit. It looks like the next election will be October 20th, 2025, unless it is triggered earlier. So I'm guessing the reason they did this was to get the guy in office ahead of time, so like people can get used to seeing his name, so he has name recognition when the actual election comes. Because Trudeau was just, they looked at the data and like Trudeau was just not gonna win. Like he was done. Like after what he did with the COVID mandates and essentially like calling truckers terrorists and closing their bank accounts, like the guy had to go. Like people were just totally done with him. So I think what he did was actually pretty smart politically. It was like, hey, I know I'm gonna lose the next election. I'm not gonna run again. They got to get me out of here because my brand is tainted now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna install the next puppet ahead of time, right? We're gonna ship him over from fucking England, bring him over to Canada. Now all of a sudden he's fucking Canadian, and now he's got 3 different passports. He's European. They bring him over, they install him in as the guy, and then now he's got 8 to 9 months to be in power, where people are going to see him talking, people are going to see him out. It's like free political advertising for like 8 months, and it's 5 months or 6 months, however long it is.
He sounds like he's a banker.
Yeah, I remember him being part of the Bank of England. That's what I remember him as, like the head of the Bank of England.
How does that tie into politics?
I think, I don't know. Well, again, the nation's money is always tied into politics. Money and politics are very interlinked, right? So he's a part of the central banking personnel, right? And now he's installed. So it is a fascinating, unless Pierre Poilievre wins the election, which hopefully he will, but we don't know, right? What do you got here for us? So this is an interesting one. This Act Blue, I've been following this for a while now. It's been being reported that Act Blue may face terrorism-related charges after revelations that the organization has reportedly funded multiple violent anti-Tesla protests. Some Tesla dealerships have been shot at and even set on fire. There's been a lot of like money laundering and stuff that seems to have been going on there, where they have all these old people that supposedly are like on fixed income, and they're just like laundering money through their names to donate, $50,000 in one day, or like all these little micropayments. And like they were investigating these people, and they're like, hey, I never gave any money. They were just using people's names to funnel money to make it look like, all these ideas were popular and that there was just small people donating.
Who was in charge of that?
So Act Blue is literally the Democratic fundraising outlet that fundraises for all the Democratic candidates, right? And they found that, and I heard like last week, like all of the executives, they all resigned. Like something fishy is going on. Like there's probably some pretty damning evidence. Something's happening there, and some heads are going to roll. But this is an interesting one too. What do you have you been following? They've been like protesting and burning down cars and shooting up cars and destroying Teslas because they hate Elon now. It's just like very radicalized.
I've seen a few headlines about it, but I'm not too up to par with what's going on with that. What's the purpose of burning down?
I'm trying to understand it too. I'm trying to, but I guess this Amuse here shows a guy, look, one of these people in Seattle. These people in Seattle are fucking insane. They are nuts.
Are they the same group of people that were against like oil or
I don't know what's going on. I mean, this is like, it's crazy.
If they were against oil, they shouldn't be attacking EVs.
Right? We don't like what Elon Musk is doing. This man would only give me his first name, Greg. But it says he actually owns the white model. Okay, so this is his own car. All right, I just bought it just to destroy it. Okay, all right. He coordinated this on with his friends because he doesn't like Musk. Okay, so that guy was his own. So, okay, he bought his own car. Isn't that wild? You're buying a car, giving the guy that you hate money, and then destroying the car. Like, why? That is actually hilarious. Go up, Paul. So that guy's destroying his own car.
Why
That is wild. So, what the fuck, dude?
Does he not want? Is it? What's his reason for destroying it?
I think they just don't like what Elon Musk is doing to save taxpayer money. I think they think he's, I don't know. I think this is the thought process right here.
Post claiming that protests at Tesla dealerships are illegal. He said today he would label violence against dealerships domestic terrorism. Now, I am judicious in how I play this sound, but I think you need to hear it from him.
Mr. President talks about some of the violence that's been going on around the country at dealerships. Some say they should be labeled domestic terrorists.
I will do that. I'll do it. I'm going to stop them. We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company. Let me tell you, you do it to Tesla and you do it to any company, we're going to catch you and you're going to go through hell.
So just to be clear, you protest a private company, you are labeled by this administration a domestic terrorist, but then you also
So I love how you look at this MSLSD. Look how they frame the issue. Go up a little bit, Paul. Start the clip again.
There's a difference between protesting and
play the thing.
But then you also overnight
be ready to pause
this
it.
post claiming that protests at Tesla dealerships are illegal. He said today he would label violence.
So Trump calls Tesla boycott illegal. I mean, this is total fucking fraudulent reporting, total bullshit, total framing. Trump calls Tesla boycott illegal. No, Trump doesn't call a boycott of Tesla illegal. Trump calls blatant property destruction, fraud, and damaging of private property illegal, which it is, right? You can boycott whatever you want. You can peacefully protest all you want, right? Like, there's no problem with that. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that. What we have a problem with is getting violent and burning down entire cities or car dealerships or things like that when you become violent. That is what we have a problem with. Now, is that terrorism? I don't know if we should call that terrorism. I don't know what the actual stipulation is there. I'd have to look at the definition of the word itself. But when I think terrorist, I think, a attack by another country or, against killing people. You know what I mean? Like that to me is like terrorism.
There's domestic terrorism as well. So.
I think they should come up with another word for that I think domestic terrorism.
There is vandalism, right? But this is politically motivated, and that's what adds this new...
Look up the definition of terrorism. Because I think this is important because we get this issue gets conflated. This is what Trudeau used to essentially violate every tenet of actual law and basically seize emergency powers. He called the Canadian truckers terrorists, right? So we got to be really careful with that word. So terrorism is generally defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political, religious, or ideological goals. The term can vary slightly depending on the context or legal framework, but here's a breakdown of its core elements. Violence, acts intended to cause harm, death, or destruction. Intimidation, creating fear to influence a population or government. Political, religious, ideological aims, motivated by a desire to change policies, overthrow systems, or advance a belief system. Targeting civilians often distinguishes terrorism from other forms of conflict, though some definitions include attacks on military targets in peacetime. For example, the U.S. Code Title 18, Section 2331, defines it as a premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational groups or clandestine agents. The UN has debated a universal definition for decades, but broadly describes it as acts intended to cause death or serious injury to civilians, to intimidate a population or compel a government. So I think, if you look at the definition, I think we need to like separate burning down a car and causing vandalous damage, for even if that is political, from targeting and killing like people, right? Like with like the Trade Center attacks where they flew airplanes and killed a bunch of people. You know what I mean? Like that needs to kind of be separated from, or planning a bomb to blow people up. Kind of needs to be a little separated from people getting violent and vandalizing and property destruction. I personally feel that way. I feel like for the government to get this power to label somebody a terrorist and essentially, basically, if you're considered a terrorist, it's almost like you're an enemy combatant. Like you're almost like an enemy, right? Like I think the line needs to be a little bit more in the sand. We have to figure out what is that.
I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Yeah, throw it to me.
So I think the reason they're reacting so strongly, which there's a lot of...
Here's the guy who had the same take as me, yeah.
What you're saying is true. Like, we can't be so quick to consider American citizens terrorists.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We saw during the BLM riots that a lot of this stuff was organized and funded through various backdoor channels.
Premeditated, political.
Yeah, premeditated.
So
exactly.
I kind of get where you're getting at. Yeah.
Like if these groups are orchestrated through these Soros NGOs.
Well, it seems like they're definitely, look what they're doing through Act Blue, and they're funding a lot of this stuff.
That's
so
in a sense like the brown shirts of the days, right? Where they're terrorizing specific political targets.
Yeah.
And in that sense, that's how I'm sure that Trump has some intel to
no doubt.
confirm
I hear it. I saw what they did to those Canadian truckers in Canada. And, if we get into this place where we're just labeling everybody we disagree with as a terrorist, I feel like a terrorist has a certain, like if you're a terrorist, it's like, you're blowing yourself up or killing somebody else to killing a bunch of people, right? I don't quite think that, like, obviously these people should be prosecuted. They should go to jail. They should, pay for the damages. Like, I think they need to be held accountable, right? There's violence. They became violent and they vandalized and destroyed things. But I think we need to be really careful about this idea of a domestic terrorist, because this was weaponized against, we saw the other side of the aisle. He used this against people that were protesting like at Planned Parenthood and like churches and like just different things that like maybe you agree with that or you don't disagree with that, but they labeled those people domestic terrorists. They did this to the people, the regular civilians for January 6th, right? Like people that just walked into a building or did whatever. They called them domestic terrorists, right? So I think there needs to be a clarification in a separation for, property destruction, vandalism, and violently murdering people.
But just understand, this is what the left, the left was.
They use this,
The left labels any right-wing activist as terrorists.
I agree with you.
And so now the right is just giving them a taste of their own medicine.
I hear you, but that's the bad part.
The right-wing ones, you can, this whole J6 thing, as we have now found, that was largely orchestrated by the FBI, right? They had
all these agents
on the ground that actually
but there were people there that were violent, that committed violence, and that committed violence against property specifically.
The footage has yet to be released, and the footage is damning, right? It shows that multiple undercover agents.
Oh yeah, the FBI and the feds. They were a massive part of the whole thing.
They
of
were
course,
instigating it.
They were.
They were
inciting.
What we're seeing is they were inciting it, correct?
But people still, regardless, they broke windows, broke doors.
Yeah, there's some that obviously deserve to
so
be
penalized. My question is, do they deserve to be labeled terrorists?
No, not at all.
That's how I feel.
But
right?
This is the thing. These left-wing radicals are actually on their own accord, although they're being financed most likely by
they're being paid,
by NGOs.
People doing this for the money, man.
They're not. You don't have
FBI
involved. Agents at Tesla, dealerships burning down cars. I think these are legitimately Antifa.
We don't know. Who knows? How do we know that? Maybe I don't know. But I think you're probably right. But at the end of the day, I just think we need to pull back from this slippery slope, because when people hear, oh, there's terrorists, people are like, oh, do whatever to them. They kill them. They're done. They're terrorists, right? I think we need to really define and categorize this a little bit better, right? Like when I think of a terrorist, I think of someone who's coming to attack the United States of America, who's going to bring death to people, right? That to me is like, it's like an enemy, right? It's a...
Well, sometimes we see these things classified or there's a big push on a name or categorizing something. In this, it's like what happened in, I think, 2005 with the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, where that essentially caused a lot of how our internet is being like gated, essentially.
Censored.
Yeah, censored. And in the name of anti-terrorism. So now you have information that is like fire or wall garden.
We watched this I think it was 2016 with all the BLM stuff. You watched that they changed the definition of the word racism to just include all these other things that it didn't initially include, so they could just call everything and everybody a racist. And even if you type in any word on the internet now and you search like, is smiling racist? There will be some crazy blog article about why smiling is racist, or is wearing a t-shirt racist, and it'll pop up. Yeah, it's racist. You know what I mean? So they've just changed the definitions and expand the definitions, and all these things kind of happen. And my guess is that they did the same thing with this. Like when you search the internet now, they literally changed the definition of the word to include all these other things now, so they could classify a different group of people, like Americans, people protesting at a church or protesting at an abortion clinic or protesting on January 6th, or even doing what they're doing here at the Tesla dealership. People that, again, get violent. I think there just needs to be a difference when it's an American citizen politically protesting and maybe they get violent and damage property. Separate that out. That should be punished, absolutely. But that person is not a terrorist, right? That person is somebody who got upset, they got angry, they made bad decisions, they got violent, they deserve to be penalized, punished, pay for the damage. But versus somebody who's here to a foreign enemy coming to kill American citizens, I think there just needs to be a difference. And I just feel like it's a slippery slope. And like if we allow this is going to continue to be weaponized back and forth as the pendulum swings of power. We saw what they did to the people of January 6th. We saw how they had all these feds on the ground. They lied at these little closed meetings. They hid the footage. They had a bunch of undercover agents, inciting violence. They did all this stuff, and then they came out and they like threw the book at these people. They like try to make an example to like make it seem like it was this big political. They turn it into this big thing when it's like, this person just walked into the building. This person, maybe they broke a window. Like, why are they in jail for 6 years for that? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's because they consider them terrorists, right? They change the definition and kind of turn it into this thing. That's the way I see it. I just think it's a slippery slope, right? People like Trudeau, like, hey, we had BJ in here. They literally shut off his bank accounts. He had a broken leg and he was sitting in his room. He had a broken ankle and he was literally sitting in his room, like just helping coordinate, giving, food, water to different protesters and, help coordinate the event for people that were peacefully protesting. And the media try to spin it and gaslight and do all this shit. And Trudeau literally became a fucking authoritarian, and fucking shut off people's bank accounts because he labeled them terrorists, right? That's the playbook. And we need to reject that. I believe we need to reject that playbook. I think, yes, these people who did this damage to the property, they should be punished. But to call them terrorists, I just think it's a stretch. And I think we should push back and redefine and really, really get some clarity there. Because if we don't, this is going to continue to be weaponized. They're going to continue to change definitions of words and try to, encapsulate more and more things. And we're going to end up like what's happening in Europe, right? They're calling people that, like, if you say something on Facebook, they arrest you and put you in jail for 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, that shit is wild, right? So it's a slippery slope. And when you have power, your first instinct is to basically use that power the same way they use it against you. And I think that should be rejected. I don't think we should do that. That's just my take. That's my opinion on the matter. Pull up, Paul, bring us to... Oh, look at this. This was a big one here. So I have also personally, I don't incorporate any of my companies in Delaware anymore. I was shocked to see that Biden appointed activist judge basically overriding like a 70% shareholder vote to like give Elon his compensation package because she was politically motivated. And she tried to like basically say, she let some guy with like 8 shares like sue and basically say like, I know all the shareholders and everybody voted 70% overwhelmingly to give this package to Elon if he achieved these goals, which he hit all of the goals. Like, 8 years later, they tried to come back and like claw that back, what everybody agreed to. And then after they did that, they had another vote and they agreed again to give it back to him. So this judge is unbelievable, which basically she just destroyed. Like people can't trust corporate law there anymore. You can't trust that contract law where people make a contract, you make an agreement, a contract. You can't trust that it won't be politically motivated. It won't be enforced. So now you've got huge companies, and I'm glad my lawyer, when I first told him, I said, I'm not incorporating there anymore. All my company is going to Wyoming now.
Have we seen a withdrawal?
I also met Cynthia Lummis, and I think she's awesome, and I love what she's been doing. So I'm incorporating all my LLCs and companies, corporation, whatever. I'm doing it all in Wyoming now. So take your business to Wyoming. That's my take.
They're very Bitcoin friendly, right?
Oh yeah. She's proposing the Bitcoin Act. I mean, fantastic. So my second favorite state behind Florida. So Florida's number one in my heart because this is where I'm born and raised. But Wyoming is a close second. One of my favorite places as well. So yeah, it's interesting to see the bigger dominoes falling here. So Dropbox has left Delaware for Nevada. Companies are no longer, they're going to lose, that industry there. That was, it's a travesty what they allowed to happen there, what that judge did to her state. And the ramifications will be felt for a long time. And the systemic changes, people are no longer going to trust the court system there. They're corrupt, right? This is thanks to Supreme Chancellor Kathleen St. Jude McCormick, Dropbox has officially fled Delaware to reincorporate in Nevada. Yep, kind of wild.
Now, is that because of what happened?
No, I'm sure, yeah. Because you can't trust now that, shareholders will agree to an agreement, and you have a contract, everybody signs it, and then, somebody could come and bring a suit and say, somebody who, say it's like a 90%, 10% vote, and 90% of the shareholders make this decision. Well, somebody from that 10% who didn't get what they want can now go to court and sue and say, and the judge will actually overturn what 90% of the people wanted. That is an insane precedent to set.
What's their reason, or what's their why?
She's corrupt. I mean, her logic was basically that the reward was too big. That was her logic.
What do you mean by reward? Like, so the amount of money that was being
So what Elon got from the reward, she just said that it was
after agreeing.
So here's the thing: it was such a crazy thing that Elon basically said, listen, I'm not going to be paid anything unless I take this stock and make it 10 to 20 times more valuable than what it is today. So basically, he worked for free for years. The media basically said this is never going to happen. You can never do this. Basically saying all these people shorting Tesla. And the agreement package was but if I hit this goal, if I make this stock 10x or 20x, and if I drive that value to the company, then I'm going to get more shares of the stock. I'm going to get a bunch of shares as a payment, 5% of the shares or something like that. It was something along those lines. And everybody for years were the shareholders at the time were this guy's going to work for free. And if he 10x's the stock or 20x's the stock, he gets paid. What a great deal. So of course everyone's this is amazing. He's going to not, take a paycheck. The company is not going to cost the company. He's basically going to work for free. And if he 10x's the company, then he gets paid. Well, shit, if the company 10x's, I just made a tons of money. So of course the people are going to support that. So what actually happened was he hit the goal. Despite all of the media paper, everybody saying you'll never hit this goal. And then some guy with some activist, probably some left-leaning activist, person who just bought a couple shares just to try to do this later on, filed some case saying oh, I don't think it's fair that he got this, even though the shareholders voted, yes, we want him to do this deal. We voted this deal in, this compensation package for Elon, right? This person with 8 shares went to court. It could be 8, it could be 10, it could be 5 shares. I don't know. It's a very small amount of shares, not a lot of money. And they basically sued. And this judge was so angry. She was appointed by Joe Biden. She obviously politically biased. Should have totally recused herself from the case, in my opinion. She should have recused herself. She ruled in favor of that one guy, even though the majority of the shareholders made a contract to agree to that thing.
Do we know who this one guy is? Or?
I have no. Yeah, I think you can. Paul could probably look it up, but just some random person. But
where does he come from? Who is he? What? Why? If this was agreed, why didn't he debate it back then when the deal was made?
Well, he did. He probably voted no, but the majority of the shareholders wanted yes, and that's how a stock works. It's a vote, right? The majority, when there's a dispute, you vote on the decision of the company, right? So it was probably just some kind of. I bet you it was just some activist who had planned this to do this or whatever. But the fact that the judge actually overruled the will of the shareholders, it just totally goes against everything that you've established for corporate law for like 100 years. I mean, it's crazy. Like, it's a private company. Like, they wanted to do this. Like, you can't override a decision of the majority of the shareholders. That's insane, right? That's so this person is the person who sued Elon is Richard Tornetta. Tornetta, a Tesla shareholder who owned just 9 shares at the time of filing of 2018, initiated the lawsuit against Musk and Tesla's board of directors. He argued that Musk's massive compensation package, initially valued at up to $56 billion, was excessive and that the board had not acted independently in approving it. This legal action, filed in the Delaware Court of Chancery, ultimately led to a ruling by Chancellor Kathleen McCormick in January 2024 and again in December 2024. So what happened was they ruled against them. It went back to another vote for the shareholders. The shareholders said, even after that point, the shareholders could have said like, "Oh wow, we get to keep them. We get to keep the shares now." The shareholders voted again to give Elon his money. They're like, "He hit the goal. We're going to give him his money again." After the judge overruled it, so then the guy came back. Go back up to the description of this. The guy came back and sued. I believe they went back to court, and the lady voided it again. And again in December 2024, voiding the pay package due to concerns over Musk's influence over the board and the fairness of the process. Tornetta, a former heavy metal drummer, has been the sole named plaintiff in this high-profile case, challenging one of the largest executive compensation plans in corporate history. So my guess is this guy. Guess who's making money off this? You better believe it's the fucking lawyers that are taking it. So I bet you this guy's getting an insane. He has 9 shares. He's getting whatever firm brought this case against Tesla that won, probably getting paid billion. They probably made. Can you look this up? Say how much money did the lawyers who brought this suit? How much money did they make? I mean, this is. I'm genuinely curious here. See if you can figure it out. So the lawsuit was handled by a team of attorneys working on a contingency basis. However, so they worked on contingency, meaning that basically the guy had no money, so they took it on contingency, which means that if they get a big payday, they're going to get paid. So the attorneys, primarily from the firms Bernstein, Leitowitz, Berger, and Grossman, Friedman, Oster, and Techtel, and Andrews and Springer, won the case in Delaware Chancery Court in January 2024, leading to the voiding of Musk's $56 billion compensation package. Following this victory, in March 2024, they petitioned the court for a legal fee of approximately $5.96 billion to be paid in Tesla stock, about 29.4 million shares at the time of the request, valued at roughly $200 per share. This amount translates to an hourly rate of about $288,000 an hour, based on their estimate of 20,620 hours worked, making it one of the largest legal fee requests in history. So, however, as the latest updates, the fee has not been fully awarded or finalized. In December 2024, Chancellor McCormick rejected Musk's compensation package again, upholding her earlier ruling. But she has not yet issued a final decision on the attorney's fee request. So, here they says with Tesla proposed even 14 million. It looks $13.6 million they proposed instead of 5.96 billion. I mean, probably the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Even them getting $14 million. I mean, that is unbelievable. What a fucking joke. I mean, this is the legal system in Delaware. I will never fucking incorporate there ever again. This is a fucking clown show. This Kathleen McCormick, she should fucking be disbarred as well. What a fucking clown show. The people who own the shares voted on something. They voted on the compensation package. They voted again on the compensation package after you voted it, after it was already achieved and they could have got their money back. They still said, no, we're going to give him the money because he achieved the goal, right? Which is obviously what the contract, that's like hundreds of years of contract law. That's what you do in a contract. The contract was fulfilled. The requirements were met. You honor the fucking contract that you agreed to. So shame on her. I mean, I just get so angry hearing this shit. How does this even happen? I mean, what's crazy?
What's the lawyer's argument? Like, it's just too much money, or?
Basically, yeah. The argument is unfair. It's just too much money for him.
What's really gross about it
disgusting.
is that
disgusting.
Elon essentially bet on himself, and his belief in his company. And as a shareholder, as an investor, you want, that's music to your ears, right? You want to know that the visionary, the founder of this company believes in it so much that he's going to delay payments. He's going to say, I don't want to get paid unless I achieve this goal.
Unless I deliver value.
And deliver, tremendous value that most people didn't think was going to be possible, essentially proving, that this product and this vision, was a success. And anybody who invested early on is going to celebrate that success alongside. But instead, what they're going to do now is try to punish him for it. That's like anti-American.
I mean, the whole thing too was like everybody and their mother said this is impossible. He'll never achieve it. It was considered extraordinarily ambitious. Some even called them absurd or unattainable. So, like, it's just he took such a massive risk. So why should he not reap the reward when he hit his goals, when he actually delivered value for the shareholder? The whole thing is so absurd, so ridiculous. And this stupid, ignorant judge is going to literally he's going to cost her state trillions and trillions of dollars in revenue, taxes, business, legal fees, whatever. Because guess what? You've just proven that you are completely biased, and you've thrown away hundreds of years of contract law because you're a partisan hack, essentially. I mean, she needs to be recalled. She needs to be disbarred. I mean, I don't even know how you can shame on her. And it's a sad day for Delaware because they're going to lose more and more companies. I'm not incorporating any of my companies there. What a travesty.
Do we know who else is leaving or has a foot out the door?
I think I know a lot of people personally that are no longer incorporating there. But I'm sure there will be more dominoes to follow. And it's all the companies in the future that are being formed are not going to be formed there. Can you go to that Can't Go with the Great on X, this Valerie Costa? I guess this, pull this up a little bit. So Valerie Costa, the far-left activist behind the so-called Tesla takedown, fueling a spree of vandalism nationwide, proudly admits her campaign draws inspiration from Luigi Mangione. She labels Elon Musk's DOGE initiative as criminal, even though Trump won both the popular vote and presidency, specifically while championing Musk and DOGE's vision to balance the budget. Clearly, Costa has no genuine respect for democracy, elections, or the people's choice. Ironically, Costa's troublemakers community, an oil and gas action network, previously targeted fossil fuel companies to fight climate change. Now, in a stunning twist of hypocrisy, she's attacking Tesla, the very company that's arguably done more than any other to combat climate change. Did she ever honestly care about climate change, or was she always just virtue signaling the DNC's latest talking points? Digging deeper reveals Costa's career specialty, advising left-wing NGOs and nonprofits on fundraising and securing government-funded grants. So it's always follow the money, right? How is she getting paid to do her activism? Well, it's coming from taxpayer money, which is insane. Totally, it's just criminal. Precisely the kind, I'm going to read the last. Precisely the kind of waste and abuse that Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency are courageously battling to eliminate. So of course, I think one of the congressmen had a great quote the other day. It was like, when you trim fat, pigs squeal. I love that. And you're hearing them squeal now. So her personal bread and butter is threatened by DOGE, causing her to show her true priorities. These people are parasites. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. And I'm just glad. I hope they just keep pushing. The American people are definitely behind them. Get rid of all this nonsense. Get these clowns out of here.
I'd like to see some of these people on Spaces and podcasts explaining, their cut of the money, where it's going to, where it's being distributed to.
Oh, of course. It's going to their pockets, and it's going to buy them houses and fund all their friends and give all their buddies jobs. I mean, that's like, go up to, that was a good take from Ron Paul on the Thomas Massey situation. So Ron Paul says here we go again. Remember back in 2020 when Congressman Thomas Massey heroically stood up against a $2 trillion COVID spending? Back then, President Trump called Massey a third-rate grandstander and a disaster for America. Massey was correct. He was primaried for standing firm and was victorious in the election. The COVID spending helped to usher in the inflation that we're still dealing with today, not to mention all the fraud. Once again, Congressman Massey refuses to support reckless Republican spending and debt. Once again, President Trump seeks to primary Massey after comparing him to Liz Cheney. If Congress was composed of hundreds of Thomas Masseys, we wouldn't be trying to claw our way out of the abyss right now. I completely agree with Ron Paul's take here. I think he hits the nail on the head. I think Trump is wrong on this one. I think he's made a big mistake. Let's look. This is another, play the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp. Yeah, play this one. Play that clip. This is an interesting take.
I don't believe that all cultures are equal. If you were to give this book to like the philosophy department, political theory, or literature department of any elite school in this country, they will burn it. They'll burn it for a lot of reasons, but the primary reason they will burn it is I am not saying all cultures are equal. In fact, I'm saying this nation is incredibly special, and we should not view it as equal. We should view it as superior. I don't believe that all cultures are equal.
What do you think about that, Jeff?
I think he's got a point. That not all cultures are equal.
Yeah.
He goes, I mean, not having we have supposedly the freedom to do, to express ourselves and within a legitimate way here in the U.S. Where if you did that somewhere in another country, you would be, stoned, tarred and feathered, or whatever. But yeah, we're definitely. I mean, I would definitely agree with that. We're not equal.
You're cutting out a lot. You got to lean in.
Lean into it. Lean into it, Jeff.
Lean back.
So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You would be stoned to death if you
Yeah.
disagreed with the leadership in a lot of other places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who's trying to say that we're all equal or that it's all equal? Like, where else are they looking at?
Well, that's that whole globalist idea where it's like, dude, borders are just a concept. That's what the Marxists are saying. They're like, oh, everybody deserves America, right? Like, don't discriminate. Let everybody come here. But, there is a reality that cultures have to be maintained, and our culture upholds a certain respect for law and order, and that comes through civil law. And that's honestly what gives us the ability to plan, to have property rights, to settle disputes in court rather than to become violent with one another, right? And I think that
it's
those
the Constitution.
things,
I mean, it comes back to that.
That separates us from a lot of other places in the world.
Mm.
So are they saying that everyone is equal, or what exactly are they trying to say?
I guess what he's saying is that he doesn't believe that all cultures are equal. I think that's
who is he opposing? Like who's saying that everything is equal?
Well, I think this whole idea of like multiculturalism, diversity, equity, inclusion, like all these kinds of like communist type adjacent topics of like, different civilizations that have different cultures. And, obviously there's, plenty of good cultures and some probably not so good, right? If you've got a country that's constantly at war for hundreds or thousands of years and like, it's, this one murder after the next, one problem, one, religious genocide war, there's different cultures, right? So some are, the pro-Western, pro-freedom, pro-democracy, based in the Constitution, constitutional law, based off of like the rights of the Magna Carta, which came from, the European kings at the time, King John, I believe, and the giving power to the citizens of the country, right? So there's these inalienable rights that we have now as the foundation of this culture that we've built in the United States. And I do think we do need to do a better job about screening people that want to come to the United States, because it's okay to have, a different culture, like different ideas, but you also need to become part of the American culture, right? Like if you come here, like you can still keep, your historical or cultural, family, celebrations or whatever it may be, but we do have an American culture here that's based on freedom, that's based on liberty, that's based on these fundamental ideals of, these inalienable rights, pro-freedom, right?
What do they mean by all equal or not equal? Like, what do you mean when you say equal? Like, in what sense? Like, what are they trying to say? Like, because if you paid it, if you're cultured and you've been to different cultures, you would I would say you'd probably agree that it's not the same. It's not equal. It's not.
Well, of course, most haven't, right? So it's the absurdity of like the
equal in what way?
I think what they're getting at by saying equal is meaning like just as good, beneficial for society. Like, obviously there's cultures that there's varying degrees of, say, trying to think of an example here.
Well, there's that culture like that of people that live on an island that if you get near, they'll like throw arrows at you that haven't like talked anyone outside of their civilization in hundreds of years, and they think
thousands of years, yeah.
So I mean,
they'll kill you. They killed everybody that's gone there, right? So that's one example of a culture, right? So like saying that culture is equal to what we've built, in the United States over the past 300 years, from wars and everything that's occurred to to civil wars, to create where we are today, to create the foundation that everything was built on. There's
equal in the sense of like, yeah, be careful because you go to the wrong place, you're gonna find out real quick.
You're gonna FAFO, right? That's funny, right? All right, Paul, take us to the next take.
Yeah, this one can go on forever. It's a fascinating one.
This is a rabbit hole.
It honestly is a conversation that does have to be had as a country, as a culture, because the West has been denied its right to have pride in its culture. You've been, classified as all sorts of things that aren't true just for wanting to have your culture. And so I'm glad he's saying this because it is true that, this culture gave birth to, the Magna Carta and the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right? All these things that allow for us to have these platforms, allow for us to have these discussions and property rights and all that. So,
yeah, I mean, I would say like, the whole, even the idea of what he says here, he says like, I don't believe that all cultures are equal. And then he says, if you were to give this book to any elite school in our country, they will burn it. So
what
like,
book is he referring to?
Probably whatever book he's talking about. Maybe it's his, philosophy or whatever, but the idea that like, even you're able to even do that, right? Like he's able to put out a book and like certain people, they don't like it, they individually can burn it. This institution can burn it, but this one could prioritize it. I mean, that's part of a freedom of speech, right? So it's interesting. It's another interesting take at it. To think about.
He's referring to his own book, The Technological Republic, Hard Power, Soft Belief, and the Future of the West.
Ah, interesting.
But he is a controversial figure.
You might have to give it a read. I love controversial figures. I'm gonna have to give this an audiobook listen. So soft plug for Alex Karp here. We'll give it a listen. Maybe we talk about it. Let's take us to our next take here. What else we got? This is my favorite one. Go up here. Go to the Tulsi Gabbard's directive. I love this. This is classic. Per POTUS directive, I have revoked security clearances and barred access to classified information for Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Lisa Monaco, Mark Zaid, Norman Eisen, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, and Andrew Weissman, along with the 51 signers of the Hunter Biden disinformation letter. The president's daily brief is no longer being provided to former President Biden. So yeah, I think everybody voted for this. They clearly lied about everything, signing disinformation, like signing that letter of all these intelligence officials saying that laptop was fake. I mean, these people have lost all public trust. And good, I'm glad they're no longer being briefed of intelligence. I hope they don't get briefed ever again of intelligence. I think they need to be punished. This was my favorite. Yeah, you got to play this one, Paul. This was a classic one. Play this one. Start it from scratch. Get some audio on this one. I couldn't believe this was real, but
she's not an athlete. She's none of those things. She's girly girl. She's more girly girl than me. On paper, medically, she's just as much as a girl as every single other one of those girls in there. She has a penis. Guess what? It's flaccid. 90-something% of the time, it is flaccid. You talk to my daughter.
You could
I
wrap
don't
it
even
up,
think
please.
she's even had an orgasm yet.
if you could wrap it up, please. I mean, I couldn't believe that that this is real life. I mean, that woman actually said that, yeah, your child isn't trans. You're just a shitty parent. I mean, this person is probably also mentally ill. I mean, that woman, she said, my daughter's penis is flaccid 90% of the time. I mean, that you can't even, like, comedy can't even write itself. I mean, I don't know. I feel bad. I mean, mental illness is there's a lot of mental illness. And like this woman specifically is clearly mentally ill. I mean, she just went and talked about her daughter having her son, that's a trans woman, having a penis and that it's erect only 10% of the time. I mean, that is crazy. I mean, crazy. Yeah, there it is. The gender spectrum, mental illness. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, this is crazy. Crazy.
Just to wrap my head around this, I have so many questions, but I don't even know if I can ask them here. Like,
ask whatever question you want. I mean, you can ask whatever question you
I'm
want.
just so confused on this topic. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and the questions I have sound kind of silly. And I don't want to
Ask them. Go for it.
But like,
let's.
Did it have balls? Or, I mean, because that creates testosterone, and it's different. Like,
my understanding
I'm
is
so
that this
confused.
woman is complaining because her daughter wasn't allowed, or her trans biological male that is being a female.
How old?
Obviously in high school, or like, she's complaining because they won't allow the boy into the girls' locker rooms or something like that, and she's going up and saying, she's a girly girl, and then saying like she literally said like her penis is only erect 10% of the time. I mean, like,
hold on, wait, we shouldn't even be talking about this.
This is crazy,
child.
right? This is insane, right? I mean, this is nuts. I mean, this is the mental illness that's just infecting and permeating, the American culture right now.
It's scary.
Yeah, it is. It's wild. I mean,
Who talks about children like that? Because
that's her own son, her own daughter. That's wild. Crazy. Let's see here. What else you got for us, Paul? Let's move on to the next subject. But I just couldn't believe that was real. Like, I couldn't believe that actually was said in a public hearing, from a school board hearing or something. Like, it's sad, but like, that mom should probably be checked out for like psychological help. I mean, that's like crazy. Like this stuff that these people are pushing on these children and brainwashing them. I mean, it's very sad. Very sad. What is this one?
So apparently the AHA, American Heart Association, that also in the 50s took a special donation from Cresco, Cisco, whatever the seed oil manufacturer, and suddenly started declaring animal fats as bad for your health, whereas previously that wasn't the case.
This to me is absolutely insane. That like, who in their right mind would want to stop food stamps from being used for healthy foods? Like, we should absolutely not allow food stamps to be used. Like, it's literally the poorest members of society who already have bad health outcomes, who already have all these other problems. Like, why would we allow food stamps, which are taxpayer funded, to be used to pay for sodas and candy? Like, that's crazy to me.
Because it contributes to the problem.
Amen.
And
there
if
you
you
go.
fix that
Yeah.
problem,
I mean, it's wild. I mean,
but also it says right here that American Heart Association relies on funding from Pepsi and Kellogg's.
So let's watch this clip. I want to see it. Let's see what they're saying here.
I often say that I can never be surprised in this building, but for the American Heart Association to be against this bill.
SB 379 seeks to remove soda, candy, potato and corn chips, and cookies from the list of items eligible for purchase with SNAP.
My name is Alec Puente, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for the American Heart Association. I'm here to testify today in opposition to Senate Bill 379.
I would encourage you to look at what it restricts.
The Heart Association is concerned about potential impacts of this bill on participation and population health. Imposing nutritional restrictions will interfere with the primary function of SNAP, reducing hunger, without reducing root causes of chronic disease.
I'm here because I want to support the children on this program and protect them from the chronic disease that sugar will lead them to develop. I actually advocated for this bill in Arizona and was shocked by the big soda companies sending their own person to come and advocate for the fact that there's no correlation between soda consumption and obesity, which is just a straight up lie.
I mean, you can't even make this shit up. I mean, how could you live with yourself being on the other side of that, going and trying to like lie and say that soda consumption doesn't have any bad outcomes for children? Like, crazy. I mean, if the taxpayers are paying for these programs, right, for kids that are at risk, it damn well better be paying to make these kids healthy, to help be more productive, healthier members of society, have less medical problems that probably also affect society. Those are the other externalities, right? Like, if you feed these kids soda and candy and that's all they get all day, like, if a kid gets hungry enough, he's going to eat something healthy. I hate to say it, but that is a fact, right? Like, it might take a couple weeks for him to like stop being used to eating garbage, but like the kid is not going to starve because he has to eat like, a meat or a chomp, or you know what I mean, like a chip that's made from not from seed oils and a bunch of sugar and crap, right? He's got to eat something healthy. He's got to eat an apple. They're gonna eat that, right?
Follow the supply chain.
Yeah,
like follow the ingredients that are in these things and where they come from. Then we'll start to find out that unnecessary ingredients are being used, and people are, and they're paying a lot of money to procure these.
No doubt. And the thing is, you're exactly right. And this is the problem. This is crony capitalism at its greatest. This is an example of what crony capitalism creates. Like these companies sending these essentially professional liars to go there and basically defend giving children soda with taxpayer money. Like, you can't even make this shit up, right? And it's these big, huge corporations that can afford that. So, this is an interesting issue. How do you, luckily, I think people are waking up. There's common sense. And, despite even having that lobbying, despite even having that money, like you saw how that woman was like laughing. She's like, I can't believe you're actually here defending what you're defending. This is absurd, right? Imagine that guy. I mean, you have to be ashamed of yourself to get up there and to try to defend that nonsense. It can't make sense. Yeah, pull up that take by CZ. Just in, so this was from last week, Binance founder CZ says, too much money is spent chasing small, quick gains in crypto. Focus on ethical teams that build for the long term. Big money is built slowly with stamina. I love that take by him. I think that desperately needs to be said in our industry. People just are trying to get rich quick, and they're missing the transformative potential of all of the underlying technology, whether that being something like Bitcoin that fixes the money, or these other, smart contract platforms, different things providing different use cases, being built, being tested, bringing real world assets onto blockchains. The list goes on and on and on, right? Obviously, Bitcoin fixing the money is very extremely important. It's one of the most important things we could possibly do with our lives being a part of that. That's how I feel. But everybody's just trying to get rich quick and gamble and do all this stuff. And that is a legitimate use case. Gambling is a thing that people like to do. And I think people should live in a free society and live with those decisions. But it's sad to see so much emphasis being put on that instead of being put on all the ethical teams that are really building cool technology and cool things.
I think that's why, long bearish or crypto winters are kind of necessary in this space to kind of weed out the people that are here
all that out, yeah. And you kind of seen that over many, many cycles. People that are still the tourists kind of leave, the get rich quickers and the schemers, and you've got real stuff being built in the shadows. And luckily now with the new administration coming in, a lot of that can come out of the shadows and into the light, because we want to make America the crypto capital of the world.
I think one thing that they're forgetting about too is how long these people held on. So it happened overnight because the price shot up almost instantly. But if you take into consideration how long they've been invested in that, in the crypto that they had, it's usually long periods of times before it shoots up. So although it does happen overnight, it doesn't really happen overnight.
I think what he's focusing on is there's a lot of these meme coins and different things that are just being gambled on, and that's sucking up so much liquidity at the market, instead of focusing on actual innovative tech or sound money like Bitcoin, or interesting smart contracts like smart contract platforms like Ethereum and Solana, where there's interesting. There's a long tail of different projects, and many of them will fail. It's like the internet. Tons of internet companies will fail. There will be some successful ones. We don't know which ones are all going to be the winners and losers, but we know that Bitcoin has a strong use case for sound money. Everything else is kind of up in the air in a sense. It's still being built. There's I think Ethereum and Solana are probably winners. We've got tons of infrastructure projects and stuff being built on those platforms, right? But I think we need to return to focus on the technology itself and, why we're here in the first place, right? And Bitcoin, to me, always has the core mission. It underlines everything with this idea of fixing the money, right? Fixing the money at its core.
Well, the money, which is, the purpose of Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to help us also re-understand or learn like what value means, because value doesn't only come in the form of money, I agree
with that statement. That is, I have that conversation with Bitcoiners all the time who are, maximalists, right? where I explain to them that, money is super important. Like my take is on Bitcoin first. It's very important. It fixes a very important use case, and it's probably the most important thing in all of Web3 and cryptocurrency in my mind. But that does not mean that there aren't other things that I find valuable, that I think are valuable, that other people think are valuable, right?
And it's hard. Like it's hard to see what this new transfer of instant value means, or how it's going to affect our everyday living. With new technology happening, with I think once we start to implement these new technologies with distributed or decentralized, something like a Bitcoin or other, pieces of value, it's hard for people to really start to wrap their head around that, because besides money, what else, what would you consider being valuable? What other values besides having a monetary, buy or sell? So, what value comes from this technology?
What do I think? What value comes? I think, collectibles, right? Like NFTs, I think can have certain value, right? Like memberships to different clubs that can be represented on a blockchain. The transparency of smart contracts, like with some of the scripting languages of Ethereum and Solana, being able to do, more complicated contracts that is much harder to do on Bitcoin natively. So I find value in that network there to do that. I find value to be able to people especially can send, maybe they want to have access to a fiat currency, but be able to move it on a blockchain quickly, right? Like stable coins, right? Maybe they can't deal with the fluctuation. We all know Bitcoin right now is being priced into the market, and that's going to play out over, probably many decades. And if you have a lot of time, it's going to go up over time, right? You hodl, but there is a lot of volatility in the short term, right? And that's just a product of a new asset being priced into the market. As people begin to understand Bitcoin's value as a long-term store of value in its properties. But for now, people might just want to send stable coins or needed to do that, right? So there's all these other levels of value, different things being built, Oracle networks like Chainlink, right? Being able to take information that's happening in a decentralized way and put something like that on chain if that goal and mission is fulfilled, right? All sorts of different ideas.
What was the part that CZ said about instead of having a short-term gain, like we have to focus? What was
he's saying? Focus on ethical teams and projects that are working over long periods of time, that are trying to build useful tools, right?
Right, and I'm not sure how this or who's working on this right now, but I think
there's a lot of great teams, right? Like stuff like Filecoin, right? They're working on a decentralized cloud storage, so you don't have to just trust Google or whoever with all your data, or Apple or whatever, right? There's decentralized. A project I really like is Flux. They're working on decentralized website. Like you can basically host your website on a decentralized server network. I find that interesting. There's decentralized supercomputing. There's some projects working on that, like decentralized GPU clouds. All sorts of different things that are occurring.
Right.
So
I'm excited to see these small teams that are working on these projects
no
once
doubt.
they start to roll out. The same way that
No
we
doubt.
wouldn't, with social media back in MySpace days or whatever, we didn't expect to have what we have today. Campaigns revolved around social media advertising and but what I like about blockchain, crypto, the value that I see is the way things are done. Like, for example, you take an advertising company. I think in the future, if we use today's platforms, these metaverse platforms, to perform simple transactions, so that we can take that basic technology and apply it in a different way. So, I'm looking forward to seeing who comes out with this first. But like advertising, for example. Blockchain, I think, and NFTs.
Do you mean advertising like in a metaverse?
In a metaverse and extended reality.
I think I've seen a lot of that in Decentraland. Have you ever logged into Decentraland?
Yes.
You have?
Yeah.
So have you walked around in there? And I think Sotheby's had an art gallery in there, and I've walked around and you can see people doing different advertising, different products, different things. So it's definitely happening. There's definitely advertising happening in the metaverse.
You got the Apple, what do they call it? The Vision
Pros. I've used them. I don't have a pair.
And then you got the Ray-Bans. I think it's only a matter of time before we start to see blockchain being used with these
augmented reality stuff.
Extended.
You may be right. I think there's potential possibilities to test and experiment and explore and be on the cutting edge of all this. No doubt about it.
Nintendo dropped, in 2016, they dropped their Pokemon Go game, which is essentially an augmented reality. You use your phone. And I think April 2nd, they're dropping some more news on what their news switch to. And if something like that has the power of augmented reality, I think that can really, because gaming's a big part of the space and what applications can be used. But if you take something like Pokemon Go, where you're looking through a lens and you're seeing something that's that's there in a virtual way, it's only a matter of time before these big companies, someone like Coca-Cola, decides to plant these geographically planted tokens, or where you can go in and you can purchase it with your digital wallet and then walk into the closest get directed to the closest convenience stores that might sell that can of Coca-Cola. Or I think this is where we start to see
there's all sorts of interesting things happening there. I think the use case for taking a lot of people love the game, people love video games, it's entertainment, right? Like taking these items within video games and having those be actual NFTs, provable scarcity of those items on a blockchain, right? Where the developers can't come in and just make a bunch of them and sell them. Like the game manager, whoever, can't come and just reproduce that item and sell it off to the side to people in side markets or whatever. You could actually see on chain how rare your item is, right? I think there's allow gamers, people to really own their digital assets, right? We've seen that these items have real world value, right? Like there's Steam stores and there's PlayStation stores where people can buy skins and all these different things. That's centralized and controlled by the one company. But imagine if that was more of a free market where people could take those goods and sell it to anybody they wanted and really have true ownership, custody over that specific item within the game. So I think there's a lot of potential for that. I think we're gonna see that. Now, does it make sense to do something like that on Bitcoin's blockchain? Right? Like I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so at all. I think that we want to keep this base layer for money maximally decentralized. We don't want to spend money to put something like that on a Bitcoin's decentralized blockchain. Why not use a less decentralized blockchain that maybe is faster and has different features to do something like that? So those are my thoughts.
Right.
Those are my thoughts. Have you seen this? Paul Grewal.eth. I guess we can close out with this one. If you're a little frustrated, I'm more than a little frustrated. OFAC continues to list Tornado Cash on its sanctions list and prevents U.S. persons from using it. That's even though the Fifth Circuit has clearly held that OFAC did not have the power to impose these sanctions. Here's why. Can you click on this, Paul, so we can go to the second piece of it?
What's OFAC?
The Office for Foreign Actions or something like that. Office of Foreign Assets Control. Yeah, there you go.
And so what did they say?
Well, they've basically sanctioned Tornado Cash, which is a crypto protocol, which is a piece of code, but it set a very chilling precedent to. It's like a mixer, so people can have privacy. Like you go to the convenience store and you buy like goods with your Bitcoin wallet. Well, you don't want the fucking person who's the cashier to be able to see how much money you have in your Bitcoin wallet. So you use like a mixer, right? You use a mixer to send it to retain your privacy. You mix your transaction with other ones, so the person who you're checking out with can't. They don't know how much money you have. They can't see into your bank account, right? That's the point. Like it's basically a privacy preserving technology for blockchains. So approximately 3 months ago on November 26th, the Fifth Circuit held that OFAC did not have authority to impose the sanctions it did on the Tornado Cash privacy protocol. The Fifth Circuit then sent the case back to district court with instructions to enter an order in favor of plaintiffs who Coinbase had funded and supported. Inexplicably, the DOJ then asked to delay plaintiff's request to the district court to execute the Fifth Circuit's instruction by asking for a 60-day delay. The district court gave them only until March 17th, so we all have to wait until then. Bureaucratic efficiency be damned. CC DOGE. So basically, they're just like sitting. This is what they do when they are going to lose a case or there's a problem. They sit on the case or like they stick it on the docket and they don't like hear the case. This is what's happened. I mean, there's all these little games they can play, to do all this stuff.
Until a more convenient time comes around.
So here David Hoffman says, the Tornado Cash Coinbase-backed lawsuit against the Treasury went in our favor. The courts rejected the DOT's position that a smart contract is illegal. Then nothing happened. Is Tornado Cash safe to use now? What happened to that? Asking for a friend. So yeah, hopefully we'll see in about 5 days. They have to respond in court. So hopefully we'll see all charges dropped and, we'll move on from this. But I think that's a good point to leave off today on. Any last things you wanted to touch on, Jeff?
No, I think on another podcast. It was more, on blockchain and the technology, where it's going, how it's being used.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so I think we
can unpack all that.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about
maybe on our maybe on Cypherpunk we can go down that rabbit hole. You and me just do a one-on-one.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a good evening.